So there's a new Godzilla movie coming out, or technically a Godzilla X Kong New Empire, and I've noticed recently they've been playing a lot of the 2014 Godzilla movie and Godzilla King of the Monsters a lot on TV. And the thing is that I do find myself always loving the Godzilla King of the Monsters. However, I've noticed that when I first watched Godzilla back in 2014 in theaters, I loved the movie, but then when I rewatched it 5 years later, I just didn't really care for it that much. I'm like, this movie's boring. It's kind of a drag. And there are reasons why I prefer Godzilla King of the Monsters over Godzilla 2014. And the first of these would have to be the main character, because the thing is that in the 2014 Godzilla movie, you do have Bryan Cranston's character, who is a interesting character, especially the way that Bryan Cranston acts in that movie. He's such a talented actor, and I really liked what he was trying to do in that movie in terms of his character being obsessed with trying to find out what really caused the death of his wife, as well as this big accident that, I guess, apparent accident that happened as workplace. However, the movie foolishly kills him off, and then we're stuck with the boring soldier boy known as Aaron Taylor Johnson's character. Now, the thing is that Aaron Taylor Johnson, I don't think he's a bad actor whatsoever. I just think compared to Bryan Cranston, he's, of course, a much better actor than Johnson is. But the thing is that it's not just that, but also the fact that Aaron Taylor Johnson's character is kind of boring. He's just a character who just follows orders and just does whatever others tell him to do. And I know people say like, oh, well, he's a soldier, he's supposed to do that. But the thing is that when you have a character who has no agency of his own, he's a passenger, he just goes from one place to the other, and he doesn't really think for himself, or at least think about like, what should I do in this situation, or maybe what stakes do I have personally. He's just not really an active participant in the story. Then that's just a boring character. But if you look at Godzilla King of the Monsters, the Russell family are active participants in the story. I did like the father character, who is someone who hates Godzilla but then grows to kind of love Godzilla and knows how important Godzilla is to bring balance to the world. And then of course his wife, or at least his strange wife, is someone who blames humanity for the death of her son, but basically realizing that she's on the wrong side of things and has ultimately made things worse by aligning with this evil organization. And also I did like Millie Bobby Brown's character as someone who goes out of her way to escape the clutches of this evil organization and does draw King Ghidorah away from Washington DC over to Boston. And the thing is that even though Millie Bobby Brown's character isn't necessarily a main character as much as Aaron Taylor Johnson's character was in the 2014 Godzilla movie, just her alone is a far more interesting and compelling character because she's actually getting involved with the story. She's actually trying to drive the story, at least trying to impact it in a way, at the very least makes her and members of her family more interesting compared to Aaron Taylor Johnson's character. The second thing I gotta say is the Godzilla screen time is much better utilized in King of the Monsters as opposed to the 2014 Godzilla movie. The first big reveal of Godzilla, at least his face, isn't until the midpoint of the movie, and you think that, okay, we're gonna get a big fight scene, but then it's like, oh, we're just gonna jump cut right to the news, and that's just a bad joke. However, with King of the Monsters, we do see Godzilla's big fight with King Ghidorah pretty early into the movie, and I do like how we do see the fight. They don't just jump cut away to the news or something stupid like that. We do see a lot of satisfactory fight scenes with not just Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, but with other giant monsters throughout this movie. So this movie does give us a lot more giant monster action, and it utilizes Godzilla's screen time a lot more. It's not trying to be overly vague and teasing it too much like in the 2014 movie. It does give us proper amounts of Godzilla action. Another thing I appreciate about Godzilla King of the Monsters is that the movie is very colorful. If you look at Godzilla 2014, is that the movie is just way too dull and dark and kind of ugly looking. The movie really did overdo it on the day for night scenes, where sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. And the thing is that this movie cost about $140 million to make, and it was partially made by Legendary Pictures. And at the same year, you had a movie called Dracula Untold that Legendary Pictures was also involved in, and that movie cost half the money that this movie did, and it came out the same year, but yet the day for night scenes are much better in that movie. I can tell what's going on, opposed to Godzilla 2014, where they really did overdo it with the color palette, especially with the night scenes. It was way too dark. It was kind of like they were trying to hide the imperfections of the visual effects that way. But what I strongly prefer about Godzilla King of the Monsters is that the movie itself is something where it's not afraid to get colorful and very expressionistic. It's one of the most beautiful giant monster movies I've ever seen. It definitely gives Pacific Rim a run for its money in terms of visual style and scope. There are so many moments in this movie you could just frame that on a computer screensaver. Another would have to be the soundtrack. Now, aside from the opening and closing credits of Godzilla 2014 that are fairly good, I felt like the soundtrack for the most part was fairly forgettable and just basically background noise. However, with the soundtrack for Godzilla King of the Monsters by Bear McCurdy, it's a soundtrack that kind of tugs your heartstrings, where you see the wife character as someone who decides to sacrifice herself to save her family as well as all of humanity by luring King Ghidorah away, giving Godzilla of course time to power up and defeat King Ghidorah. I mean, the movie wasn't required to have the original Godzilla theme, but I absolutely loved it, especially this version of the Godzilla theme we all know and love. And I just love the soundtrack to this movie, how it just really just helps elevate the action in terms of its scope and scale and just everything about it. And finally would have to be the runtime. Now, the runtime for both these movies is roughly the same. However, I really did feel the length of the 2014 Godzilla movie, where about halfway through I was like, this is boring, this is really dragging. I remember it being this boring when I first saw it in theaters, and that was because I was hyped to see it because it was the first Godzilla movie I ever saw in theaters. However, with King of the Monsters, I never felt this movie ever dragging at all. I was just enjoying myself the entire time because this is the kind of Godzilla movie I wanted to see in America, at least an American-made Godzilla movie. And I think that Godzilla Minus One is a great movie in its own right, especially from Japan. However, when it comes to an American-made Godzilla movie, something I really wanted to see all my life, I felt like Godzilla King of the Monsters beautifully delivers in that. I'm not saying that it's a perfect movie. It definitely has its problems, like it definitely sequel baits towards the mid-credit scene where we see Charles Dance's character alluding that he's going to be in later movies, but we never know what really happened to his character by Godzilla versus Kong, or the fact that some of the Monarch people went out of their way to try to evacuate some random civilians on the island. But other than that, I would say that Godzilla King of Monsters is still a criminally underrated movie, and it's personally my favorite movie in the MonsterVerse so far, but I'm excited about Godzilla x Kong New Empire, and looking forward to reviewing that movie as well. So anyway, this is Tyler from End Credit Reviews, and I hope to make a lot more in the future. Please like and subscribe. Oh, and if you want to read more about monsters in general, you should check out my book 100 Years of Universal Monster Movies. You can order it right now on places like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, so on and so forth. Anyway, check it out and enjoy.
Good luck seeing what's going on, though. Visually, this movie is overproduced and fast-cut and jerky, mostly shot in the fog and the dark.
Bitch, are you for real?